Stock Retail here. I'm excited to drop the latest DD for you. Um, I have been looking at what is AMC's business sort of pre-COVID and post-COVID, and I have just come to a really strong conclusion that we are not in a pre-COVID business model. And I'd love to walk you through that, let you decide what that means, whether it's bullish or bearish. I think if you followed me, you can probably guess where I'm going, but I'm going to show you factual data to get there and to show you why I believe Adam, the board, the executive team have positioned AMC to be quite a bit different than it was pre-COVID. And why does that matter? We have a lot of conversations, that I see in the industry. I hear it on the earnings call. I see us on the long side talking. I see the shorts talking about where the movie industry was pre-COVID and when or if ever it will get back to that. And I want to talk about, how much that matters versus how much it may not matter because of AMC's positioning pre and post COVID. So let's go through that a little. The first thing is let's think about just AMC's business model at a really high level. So you've got sort of multipliers of success. And so it's kind of think about if any one of these goes up or down, they're like levers that impact the end result. So pricing, of course, are we paying more for tickets? Are we paying less? Are we paying more for food? That's going to impact how much money you're bringing in. Margins, then, just think of that as how much money does AMC get to keep for every dollar they bring in? Expenses are going to eat back away part of that money, right? So if they sell us a tub of popcorn, how expensive was that to make? How much did they pay the employees? And when they show a movie, they have to pay the studios, a cut of that. And obviously, we're all glad for that because the studios are making great content and we want to see more content. But that then, of course, takes some of AMC's revenue back away. And what does that look like pre-COVID versus post-COVID? I'm going to show you. And then just different revenue streams. Are there business lines that are bringing in money that either have shifted or that are just new from pre-COVID to now? And then you think about just volume. So in any business, you do more, you tend to make more. So a car dealership wants to sell more cars. A furniture store wants to move more couches. And so for AMC, that looks like how many movies are there, and then what's the attendance, how many people are coming. So let's just kind of walk through that and just get an idea of where is AMC compared to pre-COVID. So first, let's start with admissions. You can kind of think of admissions revenue. Just talked about multipliers and levers. Now I'm kind of comparing it to video game sliders. If you slide one bar down and slide another bar up, it's going to the two might interplay. And in theory, like I'm showing you an example from FIFA. Say you slid a bar that, I don't know, made the defense really bad, and you slid another bar that made the offense bad. You might have actually ended up kind of making the difficulty about the same. Why does that matter? So think of the box office as the ticket price times how many people are going per movie times how many movies there are. And so if you flex any of those three up or down, you impact the total end result. So for example, let's say at a super extreme version, only one movie gets shown next year and we all go to it, but we all pay like $1,000 per ticket. Of course, we're never going to do that. But in theory, even though there's way less movies, maybe there's some similar amount of revenue. That's just kind of an example. So we're going to walk through how have each of these elements shifted from pre-COVID to now, and then what does that mean for the end result? So let's just even look. I've got 2019 here as a comparison for most stats, obviously the last pre-COVID year. We'll talk through the domestic box office as a total, and then we'll talk through just kind of a couple notes on this. So you see, as of 2019, and I actually took a 4-year average here, so you got 19, 18, 17, and 16. The 4-year pre-COVID average, you can see the total domestic box here at the top, was 11.43 billion. So domestic box, if you don't know, that's total US and Canada ticket sales for all theaters. So that's not just AMC, that's just all movies, all theaters. And I like to use that because, one, it's a number I can quickly get to. It's on a lot of websites. It's pretty easy to track. And two, I can use that. I've looked at some history over time to figure out the total global box office as well. There's kind of a relationship between the domestic box office and the global box office. So you hear me talking about domestic, but I'm also using that to translate AMC's total business. And I've done that, frankly, looking all the way back, I think, to 2018. So I have, I don't know, however many quarters that is of data, a lot. And I showed you that on another video. If you want to go see that, if you haven't yet, I break down all of 2023's forecast at a very deep level. Talk through AMC's business model there. That one's an hour. This one's going to be a lot faster than that, don't worry. But just telling you, if you want to see a lot more detail and understand some of these business levers, you can go there. There's also a Reddit on that one. All right, so pre-COVID, the domestic box office was averaging nearly $11.5 billion a year. You can see that per person, we were paying $9.26 at AMC. So now these stats are AMC stats. That was the ticket price, basically, the average. And that average is across the US and Europe. AMC reports their total average. And you can get some of these numbers, by the way, in their financial documents. I've said that in other videos too. I'm not a trust me bro type of person. I'm taking these directly from their filings, and you can go fact check me on that pretty easily. If you go to Investor Relations or you go to the SEC's website, you can find these numbers. Okay, so then their attendance per movie was about 260,000. There were about 1,400, or you can see here, 1,362 movies a year. A note on that, think of how movies show in more than one quarter sometimes. Recently, Maverick, Elvis, Spider-Man, some movies like that, where it might be released in one quarter, but it's doing well and it'll carry over and still be shown in the next quarter. Those movies get double counted in these numbers. So I'm taking these from Box Office Mojo is a site I like to use. A lot of you have probably seen that. There's other sites that are good too. And so what I'm going to do here is compare apples to apples. We'll use the same kind of math for every year, so that will make it comparable. But then also, to me, it makes sense because what you're really saying is if you added up all 4 quarters, how many movies were showing across those 4 quarters within a quarter? So even if Maverick shows up twice, that is one of the movies in, say, Q2 of this year, and it is one of the movies in Q3, so we will count it twice. So just want you to know, though, how that number is counted. There aren't really that many movies being released widely. And then you can see AMC's total admissions that year. So that's actually for the year, not the average, was $3.3 billion. And really, you can just say, all right, so, how many movies, how many people came, what did they pay? And again, this is straight from their financials. So a couple notes. I'm going to show you, obviously 2022 is halfway done. So this is going to be half actuals that I took from financials, and then half is the rest of my forecast. Of course, we just closed Q3, so I actually know the domestic box office for Q3. So that number is even 3 quarters actualized. And then some of these are going to be that combination of history and my forecast. And of course, 23 and 24 are going to be completely forecast. But I'll show you kind of what my growth assumptions are. And again, if you want to go to the other video I did, you can see a little more, actually a lot more about how I'm thinking. So you'll see, though, I have the 2022 box office at only 65% of pre-COVID. That's quite a bit below still pre-COVID. And then 23 is at 78% of pre-COVID, and 24 is at 90%. That's going to matter because what I'm going to show you and I'm going to show Shorty is even if we don't use Hopium and we assume kind of slow growth at the box office, and Hollywood's supply chain takes a little while to ramp back up. I talked about that in the last video. I mean, you've got to green light projects, you've got to find producers and directors, you've got to get your budget, you've got to get your actors, and all of the different, trades, camera and crew and grips, and just you got to get locations. It takes a long time to ramp up a movie. So you can see here, even out to the end of 2024, I'm still not saying that Hollywood's back to pre-COVID levels. So I want to just share that so you can see the reasonableness of what I'm going to share here, and then how bullish it still becomes. And then you can see that pre-COVID, studios were basically taking about 4 points more. So I talked about margin a minute ago. Studios were taking about 4 points more than they had been post-COVID, and I'll show you how that kind of works out in a minute. Okay, so in 2022, I'm forecasting about a $7.5 billion domestic box office. And as I mentioned, 3 quarters of that is already actual. We're closing this quarter a little bit above 1.9 billion, and then we've got the other quarters already reported. So if you look at basically, like I said, half of the year plus the other half forecast, look at how much higher AMC's ticket prices are than pre-COVID. It's quite a bit of growth there. And then if you look at the attendance per movie, it's tracking way higher than pre-COVID. Now that kind of makes sense too. I mean, we have less movies to go to. So while that looks really bullish, you know, I'm going to be really honest. Look at the next line. We have like less than half of the movies. So yes, way more people are going. When we go, we're paying a lot more, but we have a lot less movies to go to, and that's why we're tracking, you know, below. You know, I already said 22 box office, only 65% of pre-COVID. So you can see those ticket prices are about 120%. So that's a plus 20% or plus 18% here. You can see. Just noticed a typo. Please ignore that. But attendance versus pre-COVID, you can see is up per movie. But again, you know, we just have less movies to go to, so I think we're kind of more concentrated. Like a lot of us went and saw Maverick, or you know, I went and saw it 3 times, so now I count as 3 people for Maverick attendance as an example. And then the total versus pre-COVID, because of how that adds up, is a little less than half. So you see those admissions turn out to be 2.3 billion for the year, and that total versus pre-COVID is about 70%. So AMC is going to get about 70% of their pre-COVID admissions revenues this year. So it's lower, but let's keep going. So 2023, again, as you've seen in the other video, I forecast that pretty deeply. And if you didn't see the other video, one note about that, I literally went through the actual list of movies. So this isn't like napkin math, just making up wild assumptions. I went through the actual movies that are coming out in 2023. I went through the industry forecasts for those movies. You can find those on places like IMDb and Hollywood Insider and a lot of other places, Box Office Report. I forget, there's a few others that I've been using. And so I kind of took an average of industry, and in some cases took my own assumptions on a few movies, but talked about that in that video. So if you look at 2023, even if you only assume 5% growth on ticket prices, and I mean, you can see it's been growing a lot faster than that. And if you assume, actually a quick note. On 2022, so you may have been hearing about foreign exchange. So like the euro has gone way down against the dollar. So there's actually a drag on ticket prices in 2022, because what people are paying in Europe, when you translate that over into US dollars, it looks less this year than it did last year because of foreign exchange. I talked about that a little bit in the other video too. So the reason I share that is if you don't continue to see the euro decline, like let's say it's stabilized against the dollar, then that would be another reason ticket growth next year probably would increase by quite a bit. And then if we're all talking about inflation, I would assume ticket price growth would be more than 5%. But you can see I've been really reasonable here, just 5% ticket price growth. Again, shared in the other video why my assumptions are a 19% growth on movies. Domestic box office, I actually said 20% in the other video. We're at a higher number now because of recent sort of strengthening in movies. There's been a lot of results that have been a lot better than I thought. You know, Don't Worry, Darling, Smile is starting off well, The Woman King. A lot of the recent movies are showing a lot more strength than when I had done my forecast. And so the 2022 landing number has come up a little bit. And then that's, even though I've brought the growth rate down on 2023, it's brought the total domestic box office up a little bit. So if you were to compare my 2 videos and say, hey, wait a minute, retail, that's why those numbers have changed a little just on recent trends. And then you can see I'm assuming actually we go down a little bit on attendance per movie, which makes sense. You know, as when there are more movies, so you can see the next line, I'm saying 20% growth in total movies, that they're not all going to be huge blockbusters. And frankly, I love that. There needs to be space for more content and more storytellers. I'm a storyteller myself. I'll share more about that some other day maybe, but that might require doxing myself. And so as we get good content out there, but maybe it's more indie movies, smaller stuff, but that appeals to other audiences that maybe aren't being reached right now, that means the attendance per movie, some of those are not going to be blockbusters, so that'll bring that down. So you also see them just being reasonable there and saying we get more movies, but less people go per movie. And then so you can see versus pre-COVID, our ticket prices are at 125%. Our attendance is at per movie is still up, but now down from 22. And anyway, that all kind of results in admissions in 2023 of about 2.8 billion, which is still only 84% of pre-COVID for AMC. Okay, but we're tracking. We're growing quite a bit. And then 2024, which, by the way, also has a lot of the movies already published. I'll give you a few examples. I know that there is another Avatar movie in 2024. There is a Disney live action of Snow White in 2024. There's a whole bunch of others. I went through the list the other day, and I was getting super excited because there's some really, really big movies in 2024. And so it's already looking huge. So you can see I'm slowing the growth. We can't keep... We're racing back to pre-COVID on movies. Like this year, if I was to compare it to 2021, it's huge. I think this quarter... Oh, man, I probably shouldn't make a guess at this, but let's just say it's huge growth. Because, we went from 0 in 2020, so then even 21 to 22 has been huge. So you can see, though, I'm slowing the growth. There are some industry forecasts that say next year will grow 40% on domestic box. I'm only saying 19, and then I'm saying in 24 that slows a little bit more to 16. But look, that we get to 10.3 billion on the domestic box. So, and then I'm saying only 3% growth on ticket prices. So you can see, again, very reasonable, I would imagine, with inflation and with demand for seeing movies. And remember that AMC has even started instituting dynamic pricing. So if it's like a Friday night and it looks like there's a real hot showing, they may increase the prices and take advantage of that demand. A little bit like airplane or hotel pricing that way. So I do think there's a lot of room for basically getting even more bullish on the numbers I'm showing you. And then I'm having the attendance per movie go down again, and then I'm thinking we get more movies again. And you see, by the way, that the movie total count kind of matches the box office growth too. I've just kept those in line. And so then what you get to is already, I mentioned in 24, that box office is only about 90% of pre-COVID, but yet look at, we're already at 99% of AMC's revenue from pre-COVID. So they're all the way back to pre-COVID revenues, even though the total domestic box office is still down significantly. But then let's remind ourselves, the studios are taking less points. So if you're a studio and you're Paramount and you're making Maverick and things like that, or I don't remember if Universal made Sonic. I think they did. Whoever made Sonic, that did $200 million on a cartoon. You are still excited to make money, right? Disney is going to be cranking out Marvel movies, and so you need the movie theaters to survive. So they've started taking a little bit less of a cut. I'm hearing from some people that in 2023 already that's going to improve even more. So if the studios continue to take a little bit less to ensure the health of the movie industry, that would also change these numbers significantly. But I'm going to go off, rather than rumor that it's going down even more, I'm going to go off the recent actuals. And so let me show you what that means. So there's basically margin improvement of those 4 points I've talked about. And if you consider that margin improvement, remember AMC, so if they were at 70% of revenues, 84% of revenues, 99% of revenues, but they keep more of those revenues, what's the bottom line? So that actually means this year, on 65% of the box office, they're already at 73% of pre-COVID revenues on ticket admissions. And then next year, on only 78% of the box office, they're at 88% of pre-COVID admissions revenues. And then in 24, you can see they're almost all the way there. It's 99% of pre-COVID ticket revenues. Okay, let's look at food and beverage. So this is going to be really similar, but let's think about the multipliers. So food and beverage is actually already basically bigger than pre-COVID, and it's going to become a huge multiplier. And then the other thing, just because we just talked through margins, we're going to talk through it again. Pre-COVID, there was basically, I looked at a multi-quarter average, was about almost 17%. So that's their expenses on their food and beverage. And the recent 4-quarter average is, you can see, 16.2%. So again, we're about 4 points better than pre-COVID. So hint, hint, that's coming. All right, so pre-COVID, 2019 was about $480 a person. AMC's attendance on the year was about 356 million people, and so you got $1.7 billion of food and beverage revenue. So how's that looking in 2022 so far? And again, remember, this is half actualized and half my forecast. So I've got for the year almost 670 a person. So you can already see that's 140% of pre-COVID. We're spending 40% more per person in the recent quarters than we did pre-COVID. And by the way, there were some quarters where it was even higher than this. But again, that Europe foreign exchange revenue is dragging. At the end of 2021, there were some quarters that were over $7 a person for the food and beverage. I think that probably was also to do with some of us just being excited to go back. But so let's see how that trends. Okay, and then so attendance on the year, you can see at only 60% of pre-COVID for a total food and beverage spending of 82% of pre-COVID. So we're already on 60% of the attendance hitting 80% of the revenue, 1.4 billion versus 1.7 billion. And then we just talked through, where 2023 goes. So again, here I'm only growing food prices, or food spending per person, I should say, at 5%. What if the euro goes back up and AMC can translate their euro sales more favorably? And I think inflation, we're all paying more for bread, milk, etc. I think inflation may be in AMC's favor here, and I talked that through a lot in the other longer video. So then if attendance is up, and you remember I said the domestic box was up about 19%, so I've got attendance up a little bit less than that. That gets you to total food and beverage. Now look at this, already matching pre-COVID, 99+%. And even though attendance is only 68% of pre-COVID, even next year, so you can see I'm being pretty reasonable, and this math works out, so you're in trouble. We get to full revenues of pre-COVID. And then in 2024, again, only 5% growth on food and beverage spending, 13% growth on attendance, even though I've got higher growth than that in movies. That gets you already to 120% of pre-COVID. So food and beverage spending next year, 2024, would already be, a fifth higher than pre-COVID. But remember, we just talked about actually their margins are better. They're keeping more of the margins. So what does that do as a multiplier? That means in this year, we're already at 85% of pre-COVID. Next year, already I'm forecasting AMC will be making more money post-COVID in food and beverage than they did pre-COVID. And guys, this is not a small piece of their revenue. Look at this, 1.7 billion. And then if they keep more of it, so their actual earnings, their net is 3% higher than pre-COVID. And then in 2024, it's a full, almost a quarter higher. So that's pretty big. So those aren't the only things going on, though. And here we're rounding into the end. We're almost done here already. So first off, AMC has other revenue. It's a little over 400 million, I think. I'd have to go back and double check that, but it's probably tracking somewhere in that zone, mid 400s. And if you look at pre-COVID versus current, they're already tracking to pre-COVID levels. So what I've shown you is on food and beverage, by next year, they're back to pre-COVID. On other revenue, they're already there. And why is that? So they're selling a lot of merchandise. Like, remember those Thor buckets, the popcorn buckets? AMC, I think, twice had to make more. They couldn't make enough. They were selling out. And there's more than that. Like, I remember a while back they hired, I think it was like a digital merchandiser or something. So I think we should pay attention that we're going to start seeing probably merchandise online for AMC. And then remember too, AMC has AMC On Demand. And it's my assumption that's showing up in the other revenue bucket. And I keep beating the drum. Guys, if you're going to rent movies or buy movies to stream at home, rent or buy from AMC On Demand. Might as well give them that revenue. If you're long on a stock, why not help your stock? So just word to the wise, check out AMC On Demand. So all of that means they're already now currently tracking at pre-COVID levels, on, like I said, half the amount of movies out there, and AMC's got this line item tracking already, and they're going to blow by it in 23 and then way past it in 24. So Shorty, take a look. You can see, you don't have to trust me, they're already tracking there. Okay, and then there was no popcorn pre-COVID. So any implementation, I see a lot of you guys going and buying those 3 times size bags. There's Uber deliveries, and then we know a widespread popcorn to grocery stores rollout is coming. And so that's just every single dime of that is more than pre-COVID. So that's going to add to their numbers too. And then if you don't know, so I mean, of course we all know about Hycroft mining. I don't know if you know what NCMI is. That was the thing where AMC got 6 million shares of NCMI that were basically given to them. But they do have an expense line item I see every quarter. You can see that one is about $9 million a quarter. So I think that could have been related. Basically, it's an advertising group in the movie industry. So like when we're watching those commercials and sort of mini trailers and stuff and insider things before a movie, NCMI I think is involved with that. So here's the point. If you remember, there was a quarter where Amazon, actually their revenues overall were down, but they looked like they had a really awesome quarter because they had Rivian, and Rivian stock had gone way up. So Hycroft stock, NCMI stock, those are in AMC's numbers now. This quarter, that's, those are down a little bit, but in the future, if you believe that Hycroft's going to find plenty of gold, and I do, or if you believe in the box office numbers I'm showing you, and as those go up, then NCMI is going to become a stronger company. When those stocks go up, that's on AMC's books. And so I'm not even counting that in here, and you're going to see, I think that's going to impact AMC's valuation quite a bit, and actually shows up as kind of another revenue line. And then the other thing, and I would say really don't sleep on this, is in terms of profitability. If you drop your low performers, and I'm talking about properties, not people here. If you drop locations that maybe weren't doing as well, and you've picked up locations that are doing better, you're improving your overall profitability. It's a mix. They've changed the mix of their properties for the better, quite a bit for the better. And so even on the same movies and the same attendance, you're going to see kind of another multiplier there. So I haven't even walked you through all of that. So what does that mean, like if we just compare pre and post? So if you look at every single one of these things I'm showing you, AMC's business model, and Shorty, they may be liars, but they're not stupid. Most of them are versed in business, and so they know what I'm saying here. And so if you're watching, understand that I'm speaking to a specific audience, and they will not be able to challenge this. Every single one of these things is actually positioned better post-COVID than it was pre-COVID. And that's why I say AMC, you almost have to change your entire mindset. It's not a pre-COVID business. So I just showed you how ticket prices are way up. I showed you how spending on food and beverage is way up. I showed you how the margins on ticket sales, how much they give to the studios, and the food and beverage are actually improved. The property mix is improved. They haven't even rolled out popcorn yet. Merchandise sales have been going up, and they haven't even finished rolling that out. There's AMC On Demand, which was not there pre-COVID. If Hycroft gets any gold, if NCMI improves, every single one of these items is going to be showing up in AMC's results. And as Hollywood ramps up, because they're pretty excited that they've been making a lot of money on some of these movies, and they're going to want to do more, you're going to see every one of these be basically a multiplier in AMC's results. So just want you guys to all know that and really consider, and I'll just go back. AMC is not a pre-COVID business.